everybody, Lee with LG Speed Custom here, and in this video we are building airbag mounts in Ross Galitsky's Purple People Eater. So this is Ross Galitsky's iconic, legendary Vancouver custom, the Purple People Eater. This car has extended quarter panels, extended 20 inches with 56 Packard taillights. It's got a chopped Carson top. It's got rounded windows. It has molded in scoops. This car has been a custom in the Vancouver area since 1957, and Ross is restoring it. So in video one, we removed the leaf spring rear suspension and we built from scratch a parallel 4-link system. Now in video two, we are going to be building upper airbag plates. Currently, we've got the rear axle held in place with these little plates or little blocks that I made, and these have located it at where our ride height is going to be. So now that we've got our 4-link built, we don't need these anymore. We can take them off, and Ross has decided that we should lower the car, basically, so that when it's aired out, this top of the axle will sit on the frame. Jim threw the drive shaft in earlier, and there was a piece of tin riveted over top of here that was preventing the drive shaft from going in. With that piece of tin removed, we've got the drive shaft up in here, and it's pretty tight in a few spots. So I don't think it's enough though. We're gonna have to probably cut a little bit of the drive shaft tunnel out so that we can get that extra 1.5 inches of clearance out of here. Before we build our upper bag mounts, we'll go ahead and get these out so that we can get the rear end up as high as it will go. With those blocks or spacers cut out, I'm gonna lift the rear end up as high as it will go. Hopefully it will touch the axle before the drive shaft hits the floor, but I don't think so. Well, we have made contact. Actually, we've made contact on these two little rivets right here from a patch that was riveted in that's no longer there. So I think we'll probably make a line and just kind of slice along the drive shaft here. Jim is, I don't know if you can see him through this hole. There he is. Jim's already inside the car. He's welding some braces in because this is a convertible. And as you can see, the floor is not in the best shape, and Ross was a little bit concerned about the firewall wanting to tilt back. We haven't opened the doors, so it should, the door gaps are somewhat okay right now. So Jim is just welding in some tubing from the A pillar to the B pillar here, just to kind of brace it up a bit. While Jim's still in there, he's gonna cut this. Yeah, do one of those. Open this up a bit. While Jim was cutting out this hole for the drive shaft, I went and kind of roughed out where that airbag's gonna sit. It's probably gonna have to get trimmed a lot bigger than that, but I could see that was gonna be the next thing that hit. So I lifted the rear end back up and it's gonna hit here next. So I kind of traced out where we want it to be, and I'm gonna use this hole saw to just kind of keep the tunnel going further back. We're almost all the way up to the axle where we got good clearance in here, but now we are hitting right here. So what I'm gonna do is, there's a brace right here. I think I'm going to continue this along up into that brace and we should be good. It's a lot of work to go another 1.5 inches down, isn't it? Our drive shaft still turns, so we're good that way. We never did hit the axle. We're about maybe 3/8 of an inch from the axle, but we've made contact up here, so we're gonna call that good. All right, what's next? Upper airbag mounts, I guess. I had Jim lower the jack and I put some plates in here just to even it up, and we got 3/16 plate on each side just to fill in the gap. So it wasn't 3/8, it's only 3/16 of an inch until we hit the frame, which I think is great. We're putting sleeve airbags in this car. I've got a mock-up bag that I built a while ago for sleeve airbags, meaning that the airbag, when it is fully compressed, these are the dimensions of it. So we can bolt this to our lower airbag plate and then use these holes here to figure out where our top mounts have to be. As you can see, this does not fit at all. So rather than continue whittling away at this like I have been, I'm gonna go back to plan A, which if you'll remember in the first video, there is a body line under here, and I'm gonna cut along that body line, which I've since transferred to here. So we're gonna cut that out. We're gonna go right up to the wheel well. And this has been replaced before on this car. This isn't a factory piece, and it was spliced in right here. So I think we might go from here. We'll cut this and then we'll cut it again right there and completely remove this section, build our airbag mounts, and then we can just build a new piece of sheet metal up and over top that covers it. Probably make that piece removable because it's way easier to work on your airbag system when it's time to service it or whatever, if this piece can come out. So that's the plan. With this piece cut out, I think we're gonna take this 2x2 1/8 wall tubing and go across like that. Now it's sitting a little bit high right now. You can completely see underneath it, especially on this side here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna notch this to sit down around the frame and basically whittle away at those corners until this sits nice and flat on here. And then it'll also, you know, we can weld this way and it'll come down, and we can weld along the edge of the frame rail as well. Just give it a couple more attachment points. Also, by bringing it down like that, it makes the new panel that's going to go in here lower as well. So that will drop down over the frame, and then we'll just build little tabs that weld with little gussets that come up, little pieces on here so that the bag sits, you know, bolts up against there. We'll have a bolt hole there and a bolt hole there. That's the plan. If my measurements are correct, if we cut 3/8 of an inch in on this side and like a 1/16 of an inch in on this side and cut this out on both sides, this should drop down, sit right on top of the airbags, and be nice and flat. Well, it looks like I did it in one try. It actually took 3 tries to get it just right. But it's sitting in there where we want it, and it drops down all the way around, like such. So now, we're gonna build a little plate that will weld on here, follow our bag perch, or our bag circle, and have 2 holes to bolt the bag in. And then our upper bag brackets are built. Well, here's what I've drawn up. This is half of our airbag mount with our 2 bolt holes. We've added an extra 1/2 inch on the end because we're gonna need a bolt head, a washer, and then we're gonna have a weld running across there. So I added a 1/2 inch from the center point to the edge to compensate for that. These little wings on the side, they're gonna get folded 90 degrees. That is, from this point to here, is 1 3/4 inches, so that should come just about to the very top of our 2x2 tubing. Folded it over and provided a gusset. It's 1 3/4 inch to here as well, so that should be plenty strong. I'm gonna cut 2 of these out now, and we'll fold the ends up and weld them on. Here we got 2 of these cut out. If you're wondering why I'm always cutting stuff on like weird shaped pieces like this, my friend Zach from Wilson Builds, his dad, I don't know where his dad works, but they've got tons of cutoffs like this in their scrap bin. So his dad takes them home from work, and then Zach brings me pieces like this to plasma cut stuff out of, and instead of charging him money, he just gives me, the other day he gave me a whole stack of these 3/16 cutoffs, which are great because I don't need giant pieces, like unless I'm cutting a whole bunch of stuff, like I'll cut it in a big piece, but for a lot of the brackets I make, I can make them out of all these little cutoff pieces. And here's our 2 pieces. My little wings that I folded, it got a little bit weird. It was supposed to fold here and it folded there because my press brake is far from awesome. Yeah, it needs some refinement. But it worked, and they'll still be fine even if they folded there instead of there. It'll still accomplish the same thing. So we'll fit these on the 2x2, bolt them to our mock-up plates, and then tack them in place. Run into a little snag after these, because I wanted room for the washers. It kind of pushed this forward a bit, and it just happens to be, it's not actually touching the rear end, it's touching that bolt right there. So I've traced the shape of the rear end, and we're just going to put a little, cut this out, probably just cut this piece out, flip it, weld it back in, and then there's a little notch in there for the back of the rear. If we cut this, take this piece out, flip it over, put it back in, and weld it back in, it'll make a great little notch. Boom, there we go. Gonna tack these plates to the tube, and then we'll pull it out and weld it up on the bench. I don't know if you noticed with our little notch that we made, but there's these holes in the end, so we'll cap those as well. Our upper airbag mounts are done. I still have to weld the bottom along the bottom of the tube. We're on the side of the frame, but I'll do that once we drop the rear end back out. Next up, we either have panhard bar or shocks. Both we're gonna do after lunch because I'm hungry. Just before lunch, I called and ordered shocks. They said they'd be here in about an hour. They're not here yet. So let's do the panhard bar. The panhard bar I want to make as long as possible. And I know there's already people typing in their little computer right now. Why don't you use a Watts link? Well, Watts links, they're pretty complicated for what they actually do. So what I've done here is I've drawn out our panhard bar. So the reason why people don't like panhard bars is because as the panhard bar goes up and down, it makes an arc. And as it's going up and down making that arc, your rear end is going to get closer to the frame and further away from the frame, closer to the body, away from the body. However, when you actually sit down and do the math, so this right here, this is our panhard bar when we are at like ride height. It's 36 inches, it's going level across. Our airbags have just under 6 inches in total travel. So if we're straight across at our 3-inch point and we drop the airbags, the panhard bar is gonna raise up 3 inches. We fill it back up to ride height, down 3 inches. We go fully maxed out 3 inches that way. So when it's in the middle, that's gonna be its longest spot this way. And when we air out, and it goes up, we're gonna be at our shortest point this way. So this center line here, if we go up and measure from this point to there, that is 0.115 inches. What does that mean? That means that in this travel, as it's traveling up and down here, the distance it moves back and forth is 0.115 inches. That's nothing. That's less than 1/8 of an inch. So in my opinion, it's not worth all the effort to design and build a Watts link, because the only thing that you're avoiding by doing that is you're saving yourself it moving less than 1/8 of an inch in full travel. So we're not gonna worry about that, and we're gonna build a 36-inch panhard bar where it's sitting right now. The longer the panhard bar, the less side to side you get. So that's why we're going 36 inches, is that is pretty much from this point on the frame rail to our farthest point on the rear end before we hit the other frame rail. The panhard bar, we're gonna make basically exactly the same as we made the 4-link bars. So from our frame rail to where our other frame rail is, we've got like 37 inches. So I'm gonna make this 36.5. From there to our end is like 3 inches. So if we subtract 6 inches from that, will give us 30.5 inches that our bar length is gonna be. And that's gonna allow us to have at least 1 inch to thread in and out on here, just to fine tune and adjust it. Well, you're not gonna believe this, but I made this too short. Somehow, instead of being 36 inches, we ended up at like 32 inches, so clearly I read the tape measure wrong. Also, another thing I realized when I went to test fit it, I'm gonna have one end mounted in here somewhere, and the bar is gonna come up, and then we'll have a bracket welded to the top of the rear end that sits in here. So I realized if I put a little kink in the bar right here, so the bar comes up and then levels out, I can keep it nice and low.
and it will still, because our points will still be at the same point, it'll still work just like in our diagram. The bar will just be this shape. So what does that mean? That means that threading our ends, this is a right-hand thread and this is a left-hand thread, that doesn't work if the bar is kinked because you can't twist it. So the new one, instead of threading both ends, I'm just gonna put a normal like weld-on bushing on the one end, and we'll just thread the other end. And yes, you will have to take it apart to adjust it. However, if you build your panhard bar properly the first time, in theory, you shouldn't ever really need to adjust it. Jim's working on the 47 right now. It's got a panhard bar, not adjustable, and it's just fine. So if we have one end still adjustable, we're still far off from much better than factory. All right, round 2 on the panhard bar. The remaining cutoff piece from here is, it looks like it's actually going to be like the right length just by doing a quick side-by-side mock-up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll notch this end and weld it on here. We'll fit that to the car, figure out where we got to put our kink to go over the rear end, and then wherever this end ends up, we'll just trim it to fit when we get to that point. I've set the tubing notcher up in the drill press. This is 1 3/4 inch diameter. So I got a 1 3/4 inch hole saw in here. Our piece of tubing is clamped in place. We're gonna notch this with the hole saw. And what that will do is give our tube the perfect radius to cup this.
With that notched, it fits really nice around there. We're centered. I'm gonna fire the welder up. We'll tack this in place. Might as well, we'll just weld it. Let's fully weld it, why not? Let's gamble a little. Our panhard bar is mocked up in there. As you can see, we're way too long. We're gonna have to trim it down, but we knew we were gonna have to do that. I think we're going to put our kink to go over the rear end, probably about here. How much of a bend? I don't know. We'll do a little bit and try it. Some trial and error. I've got this set up in the press and we're level, so I realize this isn't the proper way to bend the tube, but because we just have to go ever so little, it should work. Let's try that. This is mocked up in here again, and I think we've got our angle pretty good. We still got to come down a little bit, but I've just got this magnet holding it in there, and it's not quite right to hold it, but it gets it in the ballpark close enough that we can eyeball this guy. Probably sit about there. That should give us enough room to go up and down. So I made a mark right here. We can cut that off and thread that end. This end I don't have welded in here yet because the frame tapers a little bit and I've got the same mounts on both sides. This one here is a little, it's got a bit of a gap, so I'm gonna make a bigger one that's like, I don't know, what do we need in there? Like a 3/16 of an inch longer, and then that way our bar will stay square or parallel with this. We've got our longer tab on there that's tacked to the frame. Over on this end, we've got our end threaded and threaded in, I guess. Bear with me, it's Monday morning. I had to notch this out a little bit. So our next step here is we got to build some brackets off of the rear end tube, the axle tube, up to here to hold this. I'd like it to stay under this plane.
Probably just make it parallel with it, actually, would be great. We've got good clearance in here, so it's gonna work out good. I've taken a few measurements and come up with this for our panhard bracket. So we'll cut one out and try it. I made the base wider on it just to give it a little more stability, and it's gonna hit the frame. So I'm gonna make another one. Well, I'll make two, one for each side. And instead of having it, you know, go like that, we'll just have the one end come straight down and the other end can taper out. Here's our refined 2.0. So if we lay it over top, it comes straight down, and then this that we removed from here, I've added on to this end, just so that we still have the same amount of like weld surface area. Give it lots of meat for bending. All the stress is going to be going this way on it. Cool, I'm happy with that. So we'll go ahead and cut another one out, and then we can tack those to the housing, or the axle tube, I guess. Housing, axle tube, I don't know. This part. Both brackets are cut out, fit, and tacked in. And look at that. Beautiful. Panhard bar is almost done. It's not fully done because obviously it's only tacked in. We still got to fully weld it, but we'll do that when we take it all apart. So moving on to shocks now. These are the shocks that we're going to put on Ross's car. These are the same ones that we put on Steve's 50 Meteor. Where's the part number here for you? I got the part number from the video on Steve's Meteor. I had to go back and look. Monroe 37078. So these shocks, they compress pretty short, and they have 7 inches of travel, which is perfect because our airbags have 6 inches of travel. What I've done is taken a little strap, and I've sucked this guy as short as it will go, and I've cut off 2 brackets here, and these brackets they're 2 inches, so they should fit perfect on our 2-inch tubing. Like that. We're gonna weld, we'll tack this end on, and then from there we can figure out how to get the bottom end attached to the rear axle. Just tack these guys on. I just used a piece of tubing in there as a spacer to give us our spacing for the shock, and then got it nice and level on there. Should we do the other side now, or should we let's figure the bottom one out first, just to make sure this is gonna work before we start building on the other side. So underneath the car here, if we hold our shock in and go from our housing down 4.5 inches, should get us in the center of that shock eyelet. So here's our 2 3/4 inch axle tube, and then from there to the center of this hole, we've got 4.5 inches. So if we delete the axle tube and have this as our bracket, let's cut one of those out and give it a try, and if it works okay, then we'll cut 3 more out. So it almost works. And why I say almost is because if I have it all the way against the shock base like that, it hits the body of the shock before it can pivot enough. But if we put a little bit of space in there, like space it out a bit, it should work fine. So we probably need a 1/2 inch spacer on each side of here, which is no big deal. And then we got lower shock mounts. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut 3 more of these out, and then we'll make some spacers. Probably just use that tubing, remember the tubing that we had in here? I've got another cut off of that, so that'll work great.
There we go. What's wrong with that? We got our little spacers in there to give us clearance through here. We fit on the axle really nice. We're not hanging down. I mean, it's hanging down a little bit lower than the center of the rear end, but not a ridiculous amount. Not enough that I think it's an issue. And we are 89.9. So let's clean some paint off here and then we can tack that. I've just finished welding our shock mounts up on the top. They're still tacked on the axle. I think what I'm gonna do next is we're almost ready to pull the rear end out so we can weld everything up on the bench. But I think first I'm gonna throw the two shocks back in. We'll take our airbag little mock-up pieces out, and then we'll lower the rear end down with the jack, just like, you know, cycle it and make sure that everything is happy going up and down. And if it is, then we'll final weld everything, and I think we're done. My little jack attachment that I made in the first video for lifting rear ends in and out does not fit with the shock brackets. I put them like right in line with it, so we'll just have to do it the old school way, I guess, with some blocks. The airbag mock-up bracket things, whatever you want to call them, are unbolted. So let's lower this down. I think I'm out of the way of the drive shaft. If it falls, it won't kill me. Going down. Let's see how strong my tack welds are. Not as strong as how tight I tighten this bottle jack. There we go. All right. Well, we stopped right there. I don't know if our shock's maxed out or it's just not enough to push. It must be where our shocks will extend. Oh, you know what? We gotta kick these back a little bit. Our shocks are hitting right here. That's why it won't go down. Dang it. That's why we did this before we welded everything up. It's because this is easy to fix now. Well, here's our first lower shock mount. I made new ones that are 3/4 of an inch longer, and what that will do is kicks it further back so the shock is further back behind the axle tube, and that should be enough. It was so close before, if I wiggled it I could get it to come all the way down. It was just grazing it, so we should be okay now. And yes, for you budget conscious people, I did not have my clock running while I remade these, just like I did not have my clock running while I remade the panhard bar, because that was my screw up. So why should Ross have to pay for my screw up? I can take accountability for that. These ones, he already paid for. They were wrong. These ones, I did on my own time. Success, I just let it all the way down, or as low as my jack can go, which I think is, like, those airbags only had 6 inches of travel, and I think we've got more than 6 inches in there. I don't have a tape measure with me, but looks like more than 6 inches. And yeah, I can get my whole finger through here now. So that means two things. One, I can turn my clock back on and start making money. And two, that means we can take this rear axle out now and weld all this stuff up.
This is all welded up. It's the end of the day. Gonna let it cool down. And tomorrow morning, gonna cut these guys off. Look at this one. That one was definitely welded on crooked. But hey, it still worked, right? Rear end never fell out of the car. Well, it's Monday morning. I'm super tired today. We got back very late last night from the estranged drags in Washington. But thankfully, Jim is here to hold the entire operation together. On Friday or Thursday or Wednesday, whatever day I was last filming on this, cut the spring saddles off. Since then, we've painted everything. Jim's currently painting it right now. One thing I want to point out, I totally forgot to cut the hole in there for the airline to fit through. Jim caught that, thankfully, before it was painted. So he just drilled them out with a hole saw outside of the shop here. He has painted the rear end and the panhard bar, and he is currently setting up the 4-link bars to spray them, and then we can put all this together and put it on the ground and see how low it goes. Final assembly day. These turned out so nice. I'm gonna unmask them and put them back together. We labeled, as we took them out, like Jim and I, when we took them out, we labeled everything so we know what bar goes where. Not that it matters because they're all the exact same length, so, but I don't know, habit, I guess. Our air ride system is all done. Jim just hooked up some 3/8 line, just a little Schrader valve here, just so we can just use the air compressor to lift it up and lower it down. And then Ross is gonna handle the rest from there. So the last thing we have left to do is we gotta louver one of the fender skirts. This is one of the original fender skirts that was louvered. The other one went missing. So Ross has tracked down just a stock fender skirt, and we'll punch some louvers in it so that they match. Remember the first video? We undid the emergency brake lines and threw the brackets away? Well, we didn't throw them away, but they didn't fit anymore. Kind of forgot about that, so I'm making new brackets right now. There we go, our emergency brake is secure using the original mounts. I just made a new bracket that pushed it out a little bit further so that it clears all this stuff here. I think we're ready to put this on the ground now. Just set it down on the ground. Let's dump the air. Let's see how it looks. Bam. We're low. So up front, Jim just replaced whatever coils were in there with some Aerostar coils. And we came down from 23 inches to 19 inches. So that's 4 inches in the front. And then in the back, we were 26 inches before. And we are 18 and a half now. So what's that, like 7.5 inches? I'm gonna air it up and see how high it goes. There's 60 pounds in the bags right there. Off-road mode. Aired all the way up. We are still 1.5 inches lower than stock. So that's pretty cool. There we have it. So once the front sheet metal and the windshield and the interior and all that goes on, the front's probably going to come down, I would guess, at least another 2 inches. So that should give it like the perfect stance. This thing is, it's perfect. It turned out absolutely how I was imagining it would. And it still goes airs up, so that if you got to work on it or get it on a lift or on a trailer, no problem. It's the big day. Ross has come to get his car. Are you excited?
Oh yeah, overexcited. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's load it up. We're gonna pull it out with the forklift because there's no steering wheel in it, so it's really hard to move. We'll pull it out with the forklift and up on Ross's trailer.
How you figuring on getting it up?
Getting it up on the trailer?
Yeah.
We'll just pull it up with the forklift, like you said.
On the side?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
come down the side here. Can you imagine how hard this would be to do if this car still had the lowering blocks in it?
Impossible. Another happy customer.
Thanks, Ross. Have a good drive back. There goes the legendary purple people eater. Ross has got about a 3-hour trip back home. So anyways, clearly that's the end of this video. So thanks so much for watching. Huge thanks to Ross for letting Jim and I be a part of that. That was a super cool project. Really happy to be involved with that. If you want to check out the website, lgspeedcustom.com for all your LG Speed and custom merch. Thanks again. We'll see you guys on the next video.